Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Happy holidays to everybody. We have a lot to get into. A wild weekend in sports that saw record-breaking contracts in the NFL, lots of wide receiver movement. Of course, yesterday was Selection Sunday. We'll go over the men's bracket, all the drama coming out of there, who has a good chance to win, who might be a couple sleeper picks. We'll go over the women's March Madness bracket as well, who has a chance to win over there, and what a couple snubs might be as well as getting into the other massive contract that came out in the NFL. Derek Stingley this morning becomes the highest paid corner by average annual value in NFL history. We'll talk about that and continue our MLB preview series today, taking a look at the Philadelphia Phillies. But before we get into any of that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to start off our show here with March Madness. The March Madness bracket officially out here. Selection Sunday was yesterday. There is a lot of stuff here. We're going to start off with the big drama. There was some drama here with the final spot in the bracket as UNC, the University of North Carolina, got the final spot in the tournament. They are going to have to play in those first four games on Tuesday and Wednesday to get into the real tournament, but they get in over a couple of teams that had a lot more going for them. UNC, one of the big arguments against them is they went 1-12 this year, 1-12 in quad one games. They played in the ACC, a tournament that a conference that just wasn't very good this year. A conference that sent three pretty solid teams in Duke, a number 1 seed, Clemson, a 5 seed, and Louisville, an 8 seed. But UNC gets in as an 11 seed, and that's a little bit wild to me. They're not a team that really deserves to get in. They got in over a team in West Virginia, who much better record against quad one. They beat the number 7. They beat a number 7 seed, Kansas, in Kansas. They beat Gonzaga, a number 8 seed, beat Arizona, a number 4 seed, and they went to overtime versus Louisville, that 8 seed, and beat a number 3 seed in Iowa State. On top of that, there's a bracket matrix that comes out every single year right before Selection Sunday. There's 111 brackets that are on there, and it's all the best bracket experts in the world. They go out there, put their brackets together. West Virginia was in all 111 of those projected brackets, while UNC was only in 27 of them. You can also talk about Xavier, who got in. I'm not sure if they should have gotten in ahead of a team like Indiana, who also had a little bit of a better resume, in my opinion. But the big one that I'm looking at and that a lot of people are looking at as a little bit of a head-scratcher is the fact that North Carolina got in. And one of the reasons why this has become such a big deal is because on the committee, the Selection Sunday committee, the ones that make the brackets, is the North Carolina athletic director. He was a chairman on the selection committee, and this is normal, right? We see this happen. This happens every once in a while, where you have an athletic director on this board. They recuse themselves from these situations. They're not part of the discussions to put whether or not their team should be put in there. But they still have influence, right? And when the North Carolina athletic director is in the room with you, or I should say on the opposite side of the door with you when you're discussing that team, as opposed to the West Virginia athletic director, you're going to lean a little bit more towards North Carolina. And despite the fact that, sure, I do believe that he did not get in those discussions. That's a precedent that's been set. That's a precedent that people don't have. You have the commissioner of all these leagues. Whenever their teams are being talked about, they step out. They're not in those discussions. That's completely normal. But the fact that the athletic director of the specific school, North Carolina, in the midst of all this controversy, gets one of those final spots, gets one of those last couple entries into the field of 68, while a team like West Virginia that doesn't have that kind of pressure and prominence or position gets left out is a little bit suspicious. And that is one of the biggest bracket it's one of the biggest bracket snubs that I've seen in a very long time, and it comes with its own little bit of controversy. But as we take a look at this bracket, there's a couple things that stand out to me. First of all, 14 teams from the SEC. We had an idea that they had a chance to break the record, but 14 teams make the NCAA tournament. That is the most in a single year by any conference ever. And when you look at where these teams are seated, you're not looking at a bunch of 8, a bunch of 9s, a bunch of 10s, a bunch of 11s. You're looking at 4 of the top 8 seeded teams, 2 1 seeds, 2 2 seeds, 6 of the top 16 seeds, 1 3 seed and a 4 seed, and you can keep going down. There's 2 9s, 2 10s, and 1 11. But other than that, every single seed, you have 9 teams in the top half of the bracket. 9 teams, or 9 out of your 14 teams that are one of the top 34 teams in the entire country. That is wild, right? That is how good the SEC was this season. That is something that stands out. We're looking at the teams at the bottom, the teams in the 11 seed, the teams at the 10 seed. They're still pretty good. Texas gets in as a first 4 game. You've got Arkansas and Vanderbilt on that 10 line, and you've got Oklahoma and Georgia in the 9 seed. But ahead of them, obviously, your 1 seeds, you've got Auburn and Florida. Those get those number 1 seeds. You've got Tennessee and Alabama sitting on that 2 line, Kentucky in the 3 line, and you have Texas A&M at the 4 line. That is a lot of really good teams in the top 16. 6 teams projected in the top 16 if everything goes chalk there. And the SEC with the most dominant season in the history of college basketball. The most teams to ever be admitted into the college basketball tournament, the March Madness tournament, ever. At 14, they had an incredible year. Entering the tournament, of course, the first question we need to ask, who has a chance of winning? And historically, we can go back and see that no team, aside from the one year that UConn made it as a 7 seed, no team really wins it when they're below a 4 seed, right? You're looking at these teams that have a real chance to win it, and of course, you're going to look at the 1 seeds. But those top 4 seeds are the ones that have the best shot entering the tournament. Duke and Florida entered as the favorites, both at plus 350 when you're taking a look at betting odds. Duke and Florida are playing great basketball right now. Duke is playing near perfect basketball over the last 10 games. The one issue with Duke is that superstar freshman Cooper Flagg is dealing with an ankle injury. Now, it's not supposed to be that bad, and reports are that he should be back at least for the second game of the tournament, but that is something to keep an eye on. If you don't have Cooper Flagg there, this dominance of this Duke team is hard to just keep going forever. As good as the depth is, Duke is not a perfect team. So when we look at the 1 seeds, and Auburn gets that number 1 overall seed in the tournament, gets put into that top left corner, then Duke, then Houston, then Florida, all of those teams have a great chance to win. Auburn has just been a wagon all year long. They're a team that just wins games. They kind of took a little bit of a back seat in these last couple games. They struggled into the tournament, which is not a great sign. Generally, you want a team that's hot heading into the tournament. Duke won their conference tournament even without Cooper Flagg, even shorthanded. They go out there and they win their games. They go out there and they win the games that they're supposed to. Houston and Florida, of course, have a chance as well in that number 1 seed line. But this was a year where you had 6 teams that were really vying for that 1 seed line. You add the 4 teams that already have it, and Tennessee and Alabama out of the SEC. And those 2 teams on the 2 seed line absolutely have a shot. I think the way that Tennessee's been playing down the stretch of late absolutely gives them a chance to win it. Michigan State and St. John's get the other 2 seeds. Michigan State has been amazing all year long. Tom Izzo, of course, he knows what he's doing over there. St. John's with Rick Pitino, they absolutely turned their program around. They won their first conference title in forever. They took care of business against Creighton in the finals after Creighton took down UConn. The Big East is a good conference this year, and St. John's, a weird team, but they're absolutely built to just outmuscle everybody when it comes to the tournament. At the 3 seed line, a couple teams that to look out for. Texas Tech, very dangerous. I love the way that they play in that Big 12. Iowa State is playing with an asterisk. Their best player, not going to be healthy for the tournament. They're still on that 3 seed line, and they're still a dangerous team. But Iowa State, a team that was more defense than offense anyway, and losing one of their best scorers is not going to help where they stand. Kentucky and Wisconsin round out that 3 line. I really like this Wisconsin team. They're a team that I think could be a dark horse to make it to the Final Four, but they do play in a very, very tough part of the bracket. At the 4 seed line, you've got Texas A&M, Purdue, Maryland, and Arizona. Arizona is a team that any given shot can go in. You have a guy that can shoot it from anywhere and make those shots. They get a little cold sometimes, but they always have that ability to get red hot and find their way back into the game. Maryland is a team that I really love. They're right near the top in scoring and defense. They play really good pace. They play together. They play smart basketball. They're physical on the glass. I love this Maryland team. They're one of those teams that I think could make a really big run when it comes to the tournament. But outside of these teams, your Marylands, your Texas Techs, your Wisconsins, Alabama, Tennessee, Florida, Houston, Duke, and Auburn, I think those are the guys you're really looking at to win this tournament. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. Obviously, a lot of these teams still have a chance later on in the bracket, and we'll break down a little bit more tomorrow when it comes to who the top contenders are and why they might win it. But you've got a 5 seed line, obviously very dangerous when you're going up against those 12 seeds. Michigan, Clemson, Oregon, and Memphis. They're going to have to take on UC San Diego. That is one of those sleeper teams, one of those upset potential Cinderella teams to look out for. They have been amazing all year long. They're playing at a level that you don't see a lot of mid-major teams get to. UC San Diego is one of those teams that I think is going to be a very, very dangerous game to play whenever you're playing one of those top seeds. Someone else that could be dangerous is Yale. They shoot the ball like nobody's business. Yale is very, very good on that 13 seed line. When you're looking at your upset bids, your upset potentials, those are the 2 that I'm looking at to potentially go a long way. Colorado State found their way in. They end up beating Boise State. A little bit of a bid steal there for them. Boise State still almost finds a way in. They were near that last 4 outs territory. McNeese, very good. They're back, returning basically the same team that was a very popular upset pick from last year's tournament. They're older, got a little bit more experience behind them. They're a team, but a lot of these 12 seeds are very dangerous. Liberty always comes out and fields good athletics. Liberty, a very dangerous team as well. But the ones that I'm circling on my bracket to make a bit of a run, UC San Diego and Yale. Although those are 2 teams that are going to meet up in the second round if they both win their first round matchups. If you're looking for a very, very deep pull, we're looking at a potential Lipscomb victory, a potential Troy victory. We know Kentucky has had their issues in the tournament. Now, different coach this year, so maybe that could be different, but Troy came on strong down the stretch of the season. Maybe if the history of Kentucky repeats, you look at them to take them out there. I don't really think that'll happen, but that's something if you're looking for a very, very deep sleeper. And Omaha. It's not a great matchup when they take on St. John's in the first round, but of all the 2 seeds, I think, and we've seen a lot of 2 seeds get upset in recent memory, I think St. John's is the one that if it was going to happen, that would be the crack in the armor. Omaha is the matchup they get. Could be a fun game over there. But overall, like I said, I think you're not going to get a winner from anyone outside of those top 4 seeds, and really we're looking at all 4 1 seeds, the SEC schools in the 2 seed line, Texas Tech, Wisconsin, and Maryland as the teams that really have a big shot to win it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Who do you think is going to win the tournament? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention over to the NFL. Lots of big wide receiver news specifically. We're going to break down all of the wide receiver news. We're going to talk about what it means for the Bengals, for the Seahawks, as they have made new additions to their roster. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the men's March Madness bracket. We went over the winners, we went over the teams that I think have a big shot, the controversy of UNC getting in, and some of the dark horse Cinderella teams that could make a bit of a run this year. In this segment, we turn our attention to the NFL. Some massive contracts were given out this weekend, 2 by the Bengals, and the Cooper Kupp finds his new home. We're going to talk about all of that in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw them in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit of NFL talk here. Some massive wide receiver moves have been made. We're going to start off with the Bengal boys. The Bengal boys get a new contract together, same agent, same day. Crazy. They both get matching 4-year contracts. Ja'Marr Chase resets the non-quarterback market like the GM said he would at 4 years, $161 million. That comes out to $40.25 million per season. A massive new contract for him. T. Higgins gets a 4-year, $115 million contract. That comes out to about $28 million per year. That is a lot of money for him, but if he hit the open market, he definitely could have crossed that $30 million mark. I get a feeling that they took a little bit of a discount. I'm not sure if Ja'Marr Chase took the discount because the GM already said that they were going to pay him that market resetting money. You can't really take that step back now, and he's not going to say no to that extra money, but I think he might have taken a little bit less. I think he might have taken a $37 million contract to just reset the wide receiver market, if not for the comments made by the GM at the Combine, that he would be the highest paid non-quarterback. Aside from that, this now starts with the big controversy, right? The one thing that everyone's been talking about with the Bengals, the thing that sunk their season last year, was the lack of having an elite defense. Not even an elite defense, but a semblance of a good defense, right? You have to figure out what's going on with Trey Hendrickson. There's a chance that maybe he could come back, but you have to do it now with 44% of your cap being spent on 3 players. That's $125 million now split over Joe Burrow, Ja'Marr Chase, and T. Higgins every single year. That is insane. This is a lot of money to put towards the offense, but it's not necessarily a bad move, right? You had to re-sign Ja'Marr Chase, and there were a lot of cries for you to get rid of T. Higgins, but T. Higgins is a valuable asset to that team. This is a team that, despite not having a great defense, still nearly made the playoffs last year. The one thing about the Bengals, and I think they would have made the playoffs last year if they don't do what they always do, start slow. And that's the key for the Bengals. It's not fixing the defense, which that is the key. They do need to do that. But I think even more of an issue for them is that they have consistently started the season slow. I don't know if that's because of coaching. I don't know if that's because of the way that they prepare in the offseason or anything. But ever since Joe Burrow started, ever since Zach Taylor got hired, they've started slow every single year. Their first 4 games, they've been over 500 just twice. It's not very good. It's not good. This is not how you want it to be done. But I do like this contract, right? Obviously, very talented guys. You still need to figure out the defense, but at the end of the day, you had to pay both of them. If you're going to build your team the way that the Bengals are, invest in that offense, right? You have Joe Burrow. If you can score more points than the other team, that's fine, especially if you can bring back Trey Hendrickson. They've been aggressive in free agency, bringing in some good value defenders, right? They've brought back a lot of their guys. They brought in a couple guys to help spice it up. They have a new defensive coordinator. Maybe the new defensive scheme will help this team out a little bit. They've obviously got the draft where they should go all defense now. There's a chance that they don't. I've seen a bunch of mocks where they end up going on the offensive side of the ball with offensive linemen. But the more pressing matter, of course, is the defense. I don't hate this move at all. In fact, I'd probably, if I had to give it a letter grade, I'd give the Jamar Chase signing a nice B. You got to do it. That was something you had to do, but it's still a good move. And the T. Higgins signing, probably a B-. I don't mind it at all. It's a good one combined. It's exciting, but it's also a cool thing to see that both of these guys were able to get it done at the same time. These guys obviously really wanted to play together in Cincinnati with Joe Burrow. That's something that they've stated a lot of times. It's something that they've said explicitly. They want to stay in Cincinnati. They like Cincinnati. It's a good place to be for them. And now they get their wish. 4 more years together, but that's just the issue. When you have to start paying your players and the 49ers are running into that wall now, you need to make some tough decisions. You need to let some guys go. And the Bengals have decided we're going to have an exciting offense. We just need to figure out the defense. And as long as you can hit on the draft picks, which is something that every single team says, if we just get our draft right, we'll be good. And that's the same thing for the Bengals. They do have to hit on the draft. If they don't hit on the draft this year, they're going to be in not a great place. But for now, before the draft, before we see how these players turn out, I don't hate this move in a bubble. It does, again, depend on what happens on the defensive side of the ball and what they do in the draft. But for now, I like what the Bengals did. I like the fact that they gave both of their guys the money that they deserved, and the fact that they're keeping that game together as long as they possibly can. On the other side of the coin, back in Seattle, the Seahawks continue to make major moves. Cooper Kupp, 3 years, $45 million. He returns home, grew up just 2 miles outside of Seattle, went to high school, college in the state of Seattle. Eastern Washington University is where he went. He spent a lot of years with the Rams. Last year, at 31 years old, he played 12 games. 12 games is the most that he's played since he won his Offensive Player of the Year, had that Triple Crown season, won Super Bowl MVP back in 2021. That's the most he's played. He's dealt with injuries in every single season since. He still was pretty solid last year. 100 targets, 67 catches, 710 yards, 6 touchdowns is a pretty solid year for a guy that you'd be paying $15 million. It's a lot cheaper. It's half as much as you would have had to pay for DK Metcalf. You already have a bona fide wide receiver 1 in Jackson Smith-Njigba, who really jumped out last season and established himself in the NFL. Cooper Kupp it kind of fits a little bit more in that Tyler Lockett replacement kind of range, and he's absolutely an upgrade from Tyler Lockett. You bring in MVS to be that deep threat that DK Metcalf was, and of course, that is a downgrade, but his speed can still be game-breaking MVS, and as long as you have a really solid pass game with Cooper Kupp and Jackson Smith-Njigba, I don't really see an issue with what they're doing. The one thing that has been a little confusing with the Seahawks team is the fact that they've gone out now and essentially completely revamped that offense, right? They replaced Geno Smith with Sam Darnold. They replace Lockett and DK with Kupp and MVS. They go out there and make those moves. They bring in a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak, who looked like he was ready to take the NFL by storm with the first 2 weeks with the Saints. But the one glaring issue with this team, and the one thing that's stopping this team from really taking that next step up, the one thing that's stopping this team from being playoff contenders, from being NFC contenders, is that offensive line. And they have not touched it. It's the exact same offensive line that they were trotting out last year. This is an offensive line that ranked near the bottom in the league in just about every single category. They need to address that. There's still some time. Cam Robinson's still out there, a free agent. Garrett Bradbury just got cut by the Vikings. He's someone that you could bring in. Both guys, actually, from the Vikings, or formerly of the Vikings. You bring them in, that immediately helps half of that offensive line. This is a unit that needs to be addressed. Obviously, with free agency kind of slowing down to a crawl here, there's not going to be a lot of major moves as we get closer and closer to draft season. But that's the one concern I have with the Seahawks. Bringing in Cooper Kupp is a good thing. $15 million for him is a steal, especially if you get him to play. When he's healthy, he's still a top 25, top 30 receiver in the NFL, right? And that's pretty good. Cooper Kupp is a dangerous guy, a very good route runner, someone that has very good hands, won't drop a lot of passes, and you get a guy like that for Sam Darnold as an underneath safety blanket. It's going to be very nice for the Seattle Seahawks to have, along with that run game with Kenny Walker, Zach Charbonnet, that was really good last season. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Do you think the T. Higgins, Jamar Chase move was bad? What do you think of the Bengals doing that? Do you think that's sending them down a place that they can't recover from? What do you think of Cooper Kupp returning home to play for the Seattle Seahawks? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to the women's side of March Madness. Women's March Madness was a spectacle last season, drew in more viewers than the men's side. It's going to be amazing again. There's not a clear favorite, which usually in those brackets there has been, at least in recent memory, but this year it truly is up for grabs. We're going to talk about that, all the storylines heading into it, and much more coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now. Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. We have a lot to get into here. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over the major moves made in the NFL. Wide receiver moves specifically. Cooper Kupp to the Seattle Seahawks, and the Bengals wide receivers getting matching 4-year extensions. In this segment, we turn our attention over back to basketball. We covered the men's side of the tournament in segment 1. This time we take a look at the women's bracket. Another amazing tournament promised over there. It's going to be wild. There's not a true favorite. We'll talk about that in a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit about women's March Madness. The bracket came out on Sunday, of course. This one is really exciting this year. There's usually when we take a look at the women's bracket, there's one or two teams that are way ahead of the field. Last year, it was South Carolina. Iowa was in there for a little bit as well. The year before that, it was LSU. The year before that, South Carolina again. And the years before that, it had been UConn for a very long time. But this year's a lot different. Women's basketball has been as competitive as it's been in a very, very long time. There were 4 different teams that were ranked at the top of the AP poll this season. South Carolina started off the year ranked at number 1. They stayed in the top 5, 2 weeks being ranked number 1. UCLA was the leader in the clubhouse with 14 weeks, 12 straight weeks from week 3 all the way to week 14, or week 15, excuse me. Notre Dame had it for 1 week, and then Texas had it for 2. All of these teams in the tournament as a top 3 seed, they're going to make this very dangerous. When we take a look at the teams that were favored heading into the tournament, there are 6 teams with sub plus 1,000 odds, right? When we're taking a look at a tournament, you're never going to get minus odds anywhere, but South Carolina is the odds-on favorite at plus 275, but not too far behind them, you've got UConn at plus 280. Those two teams are the 2 favorites heading in, with the number 1 overall seed in the tournament in UCLA, a team that went 24-0 to start the season, finished at 30-2 at third place at plus 500. They're a team that's incredibly dangerous this year. Their rival, USC, right behind them, though, at plus 525, also near the top. There's a lot of top players on all of these teams, and you've got Texas and Notre Dame right behind them at plus 600. There are 6 teams that have a real shot to win this tournament this year. South Carolina, of course, has won 2 of the last 3, but as I said in the beginning, they weren't as dominant this year as in years past. Their winning streak that stretched over years of basketball was cut multiple times. Their home winning streak, their just winning streak in general, their winning streak in the conference, all of that was cut this season. That doesn't mean that this team isn't great. That doesn't mean that they're looking to be repeat champions. That doesn't mean that this team doesn't have a real shot to win their 3rd March Madness tournament in the last 4 seasons, but it's not going to be as easy. When we're taking a look at the bracket, South Carolina with that 1 seed. But again, the number 1 overall seed is UCLA. UCLA, very, very good this year. They have been dominant. USC with some of the top prospects in all of the heading into the WNBA draft. I think what we're taking a look at is maybe the most parity that we've seen in a very long time. And when we get down to these teams clashing, it's going to be must-watch television. When we get down to some of the bottom teams, some of the ones that earned these bids, some of the Cinderella teams and some of the controversy, we have to take a look at the Ivy League. The Ivy League this year had 3 teams make the tournament. That is one of the most the Ivy League has ever had, and it was a little bit of a controversy. That was probably the biggest controversy when it comes down to the women's seeding. There were a couple mid-major teams that I thought had a chance to get in. James Madison University went 28-5 out of the Sun Belt. They end up losing in overtime to the eventual champions, Troy. But overall, that was a team that I thought absolutely deserved a shot in there, maybe ahead of Princeton, but the way that we take a look at it, the way that we I apologize. The way that we analyze these teams, it's overall just based on those net ratings, right? And the way that they do the net ratings changed based on when you play these teams sometimes, and the Ivy League did a very good job of that. So 3 teams coming in from the Ivy League. When we're taking a look at potential Cinderella teams, we're looking at teams down on that 12 seed line. Teams like Liberty at that 13-4 line could take care of a team like Kentucky. Liberty, once again, a very dangerous team when it comes to basketball. They're going to be a tough out there. They're one of those Cinderella teams that we're looking at. But this women's bracket is going to be a lot of fun to watch. And with those top 6 teams, it's going to be a bloodbath when we end up getting back down to the top, when we get down to the Sweet 16 or the Elite 8, when these 6 teams start to match up. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Who do you have winning the Women's March Madness bracket? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention back to the NFL. Derek Stingley Jr. signed a massive new contract, resetting the market for himself. We'll talk about that coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found. For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. I hope everybody is having a great day so far. If you are just tuning in, we just finished going over the Women's March Madness bracket as well as the contracts given out to Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. We're going back to some contract talk. Some more massive contracts were given out today, including Derek Stingley Jr. on the defensive side of the ball. The cornerback signs a new market-setting contract. We'll talk about that, what it means for the Texans, and much more coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our next segment here, that having to do with the defensive contracts. And starting off with the big one, Derek Stingley Jr. He signs a new market resetting contract, outpacing the one that was given to Panthers quarterback J.C. Horn earlier this offseason. A brand new 3-year, $90 million extension for Stingley. Stingley coming off of his best season. His first team All-Pro selection, was one of the best cornerbacks in all of the NFL. He was taken in the top 5 for a reason. He was showing it. He's been amazing his entire career. But now the Texans do the smart thing. They get ahead of the market. With so many young corners coming up soon for new contracts, they get ahead of it. This 3-year extension adds years onto his 2-year deal that he already has, so he's locked up for the next 5 seasons. $118 million over those next 5 years will be given to the young superstar. He is a corner piece of that defense, a cornerstone of that defense, someone that they desperately needed to lock up long term. And like I've been saying for a long time, it might sound like a lot now, but when you take a look at what it's going to be in 2, maybe even just 1 season, once Sauce Gardner and everyone else in that draft class gets their brand new contract, when everyone in the year after them gets their brand new contract, Christian Gonzalez, guys like that, this is going to look like a steal. And the Texans are very smart to get ahead of it. We're looking at other teams to get ahead of it now. The Jets are probably next on the docket when it comes to paying corners with Sauce Gardner. But maybe someone else beats them to the punch and that price tag keeps going higher. Derek Stingley Jr., of course, has been just amazing. Right? Again, first team All-Pro last season, the second best corner in football behind the Defensive Player of the Year in Pat Surtain for the Broncos. He deserves to get paid like the best because he has been the best. Outdoes that 4-year, $100 million being given to J.C. Horn by the Panthers at the beginning of free agency. But that wasn't the only big defensive move that took place this afternoon. We saw one of the big moves that I thought was going to come sooner, someone that I thought more teams should be interested in, Azeez Ojulari, a really high value contract given to him by the Eagles. 1 year, $4 million for the former Giants pass rusher. He comes in. He's been kind of a backup for the Giants, but he's amazing pass rusher. When he's healthy, which he struggled with injury issues. Last season when he got back on the field, he was in the top 5 for sacks for a little while at the beginning of the season. He's someone that came out there, shot out like a cannon. He's an amazing pass rusher. He's fast, strong, powerful, everything you need. He's got good bend. Ojulari, another one of those Giants to Philadelphia Eagle pipelines, seemingly. That's going to be a massive signing for them. The Eagles lost a whole lot of talent, especially on the defensive line, losing guys like Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. They replaced one of those with Azeez Ojulari. 1 year, $4 million. It's not a lot of money to give, but he should have a pretty good season in that ecosystem over there, and I look forward to seeing what he can do. That addresses one of the big needs that the Eagles had this offseason after losing a lot of their guys in free agency. We'll see what happens down the stretch here, but I really, really do love the contracts that they were getting, the contracts that they've been giving out, and I love this Derek Stingley signing. When we get back to the Texans here, the Texans are showing initiative to keep their young core around, right? They traded away Laramie Tunsil, big contract off the books. That helped free up some money for them to give Derek Stingley this extension. They're going to be preparing to pay C.J. Stroud in the next couple of seasons. They've already paid Nico Collins. They're trying to keep that young core around. This is a young team that hopefully can find a way to compete for championships in the next couple seasons, and getting the defensive and offensive centerpieces put together right now is going to be very important. They're going to have to extend guys like Anderson as well coming up soon. He's got a couple years left on his rookie deal, but we're coming to that point where you got to start paying attention to these guys and start spending money, and the Texans are in a good spot for that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of any of these contracts? What do you think of the Stingley contract, Azeez Ojulari going to the Eagles? I'd love to hear your thoughts. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we turn our attention to baseball. The season kicks off actually tomorrow in Japan, but opening day really is in 10 days. The countdown is on. We're making our way through every single team. Today, we take a look in Philadelphia with the Phillies. We'll be right back here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. Welcome back to GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. If you were just tuning in, we just finished going over some more big contracts in the NFL, including Derek Stingley resetting the market, 3 years, $90 million to stay with the Houston Texans. In this segment, we turn our attention to baseball. Opening day with the Japan series between the Dodgers and the Cubs kicks off tomorrow. But today, we're taking a look at the Phillies. With the rest of the league opening up in 10 days, we're making our way through each and every single team. But before we do that, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 17th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into a little bit on the Philadelphia Phillies. The Philadelphia Phillies have been really close to a World Series for a very long time now. Last year, they went 95-67, winning the NL East, falling short in their playoff series against NL East rival, the New York Mets. They lost in the NLDS 3-1 after the Mets kind of went on a little bit of a magical run after Pete Alonso hit that home run in Milwaukee. But they were busy this offseason. They didn't go out and get too many guys, but they got guys that are going to come in and pay immediate dividends. They brought in closer Jordan Romano. 1 year, $8.5 million for Romano. Romano has been the closer for the Blue Jays for the last 4 seasons. He was dealing with injuries last season, but was 8 for 9 in saves last season. But the year before that, 36 saves. The year before that, 36 more saves. And the year before that, 23 saves. So he's been an elite closer in the past. He kind of gets into a little bit of trouble with runners on base, but he's been very good. This is, of course, because they lost their closer, Carlos Estevez, in free agency, a guy they traded for at the trade deadline. But they go out and they get Romano. A little bit of a downgrade, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, they still made a lot of good moves. They bring in Max Kepler from the Twins. He's going to be a really good bench back, depth outfielder for them. Joe Ross as a backup starter. I've got a soft spot in my heart for Joe Ross. 1 year, $4 million for a guy that I think can be a really solid end-of-rotation guy or bullpen guy is going to be very good. They bring in Christian Arroyo on a minor league deal for some depth as well. But the big move this offseason for the Marlins was acquiring a 5th starter. For the Phillies was acquiring a 5th starter. They got him from the Marlins. You don't often see in-division trades like this, but they got starting pitcher Jesus Luzardo and catcher Paul McIntosh for outfielder Amarian Boyd and shortstop Starlin Caba. Right? They go out and they get a really good starting pitching, and in Jesus Luzardo. He slots in as the 5th starting pitcher in their rotation. He's a little bit inconsistent. It's fair. He hasn't been 100%, but when he's on, he's got some of the nastiest stuff in baseball. He's got some of the best stuff. We've seen him get a sub-4 ERA when he's on last year. Not really his best year with a 5 even ERA, but as a 5th starter, that's a really good spot to be, right? You go out and you look at that starting pitching rotation. Oh my God, is it amazing. You've got, of course, the deadly duo of Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. Throw Ranger Suarez in there, and that's a deadly trio. Christopher Sanchez and Jesus Luzardo round it out. That is one of the best starting pitching rotations in all of baseball. Probably definitely the best in the NL East. I would say the NL, but you're dealing with the Dodgers over there as well, and the Diamondbacks, and they could probably give them a run for their money here. But you have some of the most dominant pitchers at the top of this lineup. You have a pitching rotation that can go 6-7 deep if necessary. You've got Joe Ross and Taijuan Walker, who have starting experience in the bullpen, so you have depth in case anything does happen. I'm a huge fan of this Phillies rotation. They did lose a couple players in the offseason. We talked about them losing Carlos Estevez already. Austin Hayes was really the only other big loss. They lose Jeff Hoffman for depth and Spencer Turnbull as well, but at the end of the day, they have the guys to replace them. They bring in Max Kepler to replace Austin Hayes. They bring in Jordan Romano to replace Carlos Estevez. They bring in Joe Ross to replace Spencer Turnbull. This is a team that fixed all of the holes that they lost, and it's a team that, while they're getting a little bit older, is still stacked with talent all the way 1 to 9. You obviously have Trey Turner leading off at shortstop, his former and current teammate in Bryce Harper at hitting right behind him. First base, he's talked about switching to outfield. I doubt that's going to happen, but sometimes if injuries happen, you might see him back out there this season. Alec Boehm behind him hitting third. Kyle Schwarber, a guy that just hits absolute tanks, hitting fourth in your cleanup spot at DH. Nick Castellanos behind him hitting fifth. Max Kepler in left field hitting sixth. JT Realmuto, who's lost a little bit of a step defensively, but still a very good catcher. Bryson Stott or Edmundo Sosa, at the 8 spot, and Brandon Marsh or Johan Rojas at the center field position. This is a team that is stacked on the lineup with the starting pitching. Where you could get them, though, where you could get them a little bit, is in the bullpen. We talked about how the back end of that bullpen got a little bit weaker. I like Jordan Romano, but Jordan Romano isn't an elite isn't an elite closer. And for the last couple years, the bullpen has been their weakness. They keep trading for closers at the deadline, and they haven't really stayed right. You got Orion Kirkcraig, as the setup guy, as well as Jose Alvarado. You got Joe Ross, we talked about him, Tanner Banks, Jose Ruiz, Kyle Tucker, and Taijuan Walker in that bullpen as well. But really, that's their big weakness, is that bullpen, and that's where they're going to get into trouble. You have the lineup to outscore anybody and hit off anybody. You have the rotation to shut down anybody. But if they get into trouble early, if Luzardo isn't on a given day, they're going to be in a little bit of trouble if they have to turn it over to that bullpen. They're going to have to make a move at the deadline, and I expect them to. They're probably going to do that. This is a Phillies team that is very, very talented, and they continue to be World Series contenders year in and year out. We take a look at their over-under totals right now. It's sitting at about 90.5, 91.5, depending on where you look. But this is a team that's projected to win 90 games. The issue is they are in a very good division. The NL East is going to bring out at least 2, potentially 3 playoff teams this season. We're talking about the Braves, who were injured up and down to heck and back this last year. They won't be that injured again. They'll be great. They're a very stacked team. The Mets, who bring in Juan Soto to a team that made it to the NLCS last season, took them out in the playoffs. That's not going to be easy. The Nationals, to a certain extent, they've got a lot of young talent. I'm not sure if this is really their year, but that's a team that could be dangerous as well. It's not necessarily going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be tough. I'm not sure if they're going to repeat as winners of the NL East, but I do think they're going to be up there in wins. I'm penciling them in somewhere between 87 and 90 wins, somewhere in that range. I love this Phillies team. They're going to make the playoffs again. They're going to be World Series contenders yet again. They have that lineup that, as long as they can stay healthy, even if some pitching injuries happen in near the middle or the beginning of the season, they have the guys to replace them and still keep going. This is a very good Phillies team. They've got everything set up for them as they need to. And I think they're a team that could contend for a World Series. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think this Phillies team is going to look like this season? Baseball right around the corner. We've got our first regular season game tomorrow. Cannot wait for that. And thank you, everybody, so much for tuning in to today's episode of GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I have been your host, Jeremy Lapidus. We'll be back tomorrow talking some strategies for making your brackets, talking some baseball, talking some more news from around the world of sports, anything else that comes out, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and